Everybody, I'm very excited to have you join us for this session, Transitioning into the New Normal. What is the future of work post-COVID? And I'm really excited to have with me today people from three stellar nonprofit organizations here in the San Diego region. We've got Christy Marcella from the Jacobs Center for Neighborhood Innovation, Tasreen Kamisa from the Tariq Kamisa Foundation, and Greg Angel from Interfaith Community Services. Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and to share your insights and observations with what you're going through in your organizations and also what you're seeing with your boards and in the community as a whole. And so just to kind of set the table for our conversation, I did want to again reiterate some of the things that I mentioned when we kicked off this symposium this morning, to highlight that I think we all know, but our surveys also told us that the nonprofit sector faced unprecedented disruption with the pandemic, and it wasn't like the Great Recession. Actually, it was something that was wholly different from the Great Recession that was over a decade ago. In that case, we talked about the nonprofit sector really as the resilient sector. It was one of the few sectors of our economy that continued to grow in response to growing demand for services. And also there was a commensurate influx of resources to support that demand. And the nonprofit sector was really organized to respond to that. But this time it was really challenging for nonprofit organizations because of course we all had to stay at home. And so those stay-home orders really disrupted in a wide variety of ways the manner in which nonprofit organizations could deliver critical services to the community. And you certainly all saw that no matter what the mission of your organization is, everyone had to kind of reorient their programming and the way they thought about the services to the community. And not only that, but there were also disruptions in terms of revenue sources. And I know you'll all be able to speak to that. And they went different ways. Some organizations saw a steep drop-off with the decline of fee-for-services and government contracts that maybe were suspended, other kinds of grants from foundations where they were looking at supporting immediate post-COVID response, and that meant that other kinds of programs didn't get support. And then, of course, there was a real impact on nonprofit teams, where we saw a number of organizations faced with, on the one hand, this increased demand for services, and then on the other hand, with the drop in revenues, having to actually furlough or cut staff. And some organizations have not fully recovered from those cuts. So with all that in mind, I guess the question is for all of you to kind of share from your very different experiences what you faced and what you're looking at post-COVID in terms of what is that path forward, what is that path to recovery. And also, very importantly, what did you learn from the crisis that can really help inform how we rebuild? I think a lot of us realized we actually don't want to go back to the way it was. There was a lot that wasn't good about the way things were before. And so what does the future, San Diego region, the future of your work look like in the way you extend your mission to the community? And we'd love to hear about your different strategies and approaches because they are very different. And that's one of the things that I found really interesting when we were actually preparing for this session. So first, I'd like to start by having each of you just say very briefly, starting with Christy, just tell us about you and your organization.
Sure, thanks, Emily. So I am Christy Marcella with the Jacobs Center for Neighborhood Innovation. We've been supporting the southeastern San Diego community since 1995. We began as the operating arm of the Jacobs Family Foundation and are really looking at transitioning to the founder's original vision of transferring the organization's leadership to community ownership. So we are actually in the midst of recruiting a new community-based board member. We brought on a community-based board member at the beginning of this year. And so during COVID-19, we've really looked at how we leverage our physical facility of the Jacobs Center and our campus and our partnerships to really look at collective impact work. And that has been the focus of how we've approached COVID-19, is to search for more partners and to work in ways that we weren't working together prior to COVID-19.
Well, thank you. I really look forward to your sharing more about that with those of you that are listening in today. And now, Tasreen, can you share with us a bit more about you and your organization?
Yes, well, hello. My name is Thasreen Kamisa, and I am the Executive Director of the Tharik Kamisa Foundation, or TKF. TKF is an educational organization with the goal of creating safer schools and communities. We partner with schools and organizations to implement our Safe School Model programming, which consists of 5 programs that teach the restorative principles of accountability, compassion, forgiveness, and peacemaking. We are rooted in San Diego. We have been here for 25 years, and we recently began a national expansion of our programs in Pennsylvania and Colorado. Over the last 25 years, we've partnered with over 300 schools and provided direct service programming to close to 600,000 students. I'm happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much, Tasreen. And now, Greg, I'd like to turn to you. Share with us a bit about you and your organization.
Thanks, Emily. I'm the CEO of Interfaith Community Services. Interfaith is a large multi-services social services agency in North San Diego County, and our partners and our teams served more than 20,000 unique individuals last year, helping with food, housing, employment, counseling, addiction treatment services, wraparound support to help people stabilize in crisis and reach their highest level of self-reliance and self-sufficiency. And as you can imagine, amid COVID, the demand for our services skyrocketed. Initially, in the early days, there was a huge swell, more than 500% of people just coming in need of food assistance. And then, no surprise, shortly thereafter, the need for rental assistance emerged as a major challenge. We never stopped. We never closed our doors. We never stopped operating services. Most of what we do has to be done in person. We did identify some elements of what we can do virtually, and some of those things we will continue to do virtually. So, if somebody is about to be evicted or they're behind on their rent, they can provide a lot of documentation to us to help us support helping them out virtually, as an example. Increasing access to our programs that traditionally people would have to come to one of our locations. I'm in Escondido at our headquarters. Traditionally, people would have to come here in person to receive, to do something like a tax return, which is one of the services we provide. We've created online mechanisms for that to happen. And some people will, still want to come in here and sit down face to face with a volunteer or an employee to complete their taxes, and this year, get their stimulus check as well. But others can now do it online. So, we found ways to continue to provide the services, meet increased demands, and then try to do some things a little more efficiently as a result going forward.
Well, thank you. I'm always inspired when I hear about the incredible work and the plethora of work that our nonprofit organizations across San Diego County are undertaking. And I'm also very inspired by all of our leadership. We're just so fortunate to have you in our community. And so thank you very much for the work that you do. And you just scratched the surface of some of the things that you did over the last 18 months. I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit more for us on, over the last 18 months, when you think about your organization, you think about the way you carried out your mission and the things that you had to shift or figure out. What really stands out to you that you'd like to share with the rest of us today? And I'm going to go reverse order this time and start with you, Greg.
The importance of people. We rely historically on thousands of volunteers to be our frontline social workers, our morning meal cooks, and our servers. And in COVID, a lot of them are older and retired. They had to stay home. And our staff stepped up, put themselves at risk in a time of great uncertainty and fear to help others. And the resilience of the resilience of our community. I'll never forget the mom who came when we were doing all of our services outdoors. The mom who came for food because she had gotten COVID. She hadn't left her apartment in 3 weeks, and she had her 2 little kids in the back seat. And she was coming here because the first place she left was to come to Interfaith to get food to feed her family. The strength of her and the strength of our employees and now our returning volunteer workforce to work together to help each other through these really challenging times. I'll always take that away and always gain inspiration from people, from each other.
Thanks so much, Greg. And it's really important that we tell those individual stories because it puts faces to the statistics that don't really tell the full story of what people went through and how unevenly we suffered through the pandemic. So how about you, Tasreen?
The pandemic definitely affected us in deep ways, like everyone. We're a direct service organization that provides services in schools. And so kind of when the world shut down, all of our direct services, which is about 75% of what we do, were shut down. All of our contracts were suspended. And I think what I found in that time was just the strength and resiliency within our own organization, that in uncertainty, there's kind of an automatic sometimes response to kick into fear. And as a board and as a staff, we didn't want to go down that path. And we really wanted to take a pause and gain some clarity around, what's the future of TKF? What are our long-term goals? And how do we sustain this organization as we knew our services would be needed in even such a greater way as people integrate back into schools? And we know the social emotional needs of our young people are more than ever, where they need our type of services. And so we really just kind of paused and really internally invested in the organization by developing a strong roadmap and a 3-year plan that really focused around that sustainment, and how we can integrate back into this, like from crisis to recovery to this new normal that we're all going to live. And I think what really struck me the most is just that it bonded us stronger as a board and as an organization doing this work, and the support that we gave each other in this space have really honestly strengthened our organization in so many ways. And we found meaningful ways to look at the other arms of our organization. We do a lot of work in training and advocacy as well. And how can we continue to serve in this time for the greater good in the work that we do?
Thank you so much, Tasreen. And I think that's really interesting, your point about how the staff and the board grew closer and how you really paused and took a step back. And one of the big questions that I think none of us anticipated and probably was in no strategic plan or business plan was, what to do about a pandemic should we be hit with one. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that there is a great unknown. And actually, we've evolved over hundreds and thousands of years to really grapple with uncertainty. But oftentimes that's masked by having these concrete plans and this sense that, we've got it all together. We've got a set of strategies and tactics that, hopefully will help us carry forth our mission. But we have to really also expect the unexpected. And that's certainly something that the pandemic taught us. Well, Christy, how about you?
Sure. I'll just add to what my colleagues have said by also saying that for us, COVID-19 created new opportunities that we didn't expect being hit with a pandemic. I think there was questions about whether or not remote work was something in the future of the world of work. And for our organization, I think remote work created flexibility that our passionate staff could do more than they maybe even did, or were more productive than when they had this construct of you come into the office from this time to that time. And that our dedicated team just worked whatever hours were necessary to continue the work of our organization. I think we also recognize that our organization is seen as an anchor and that other organizations look to us to partner with them to offer emergency services like food distribution, which continues to happen weekly on our campus, or our longstanding history with supporting arts and culture to create safe performance spaces that were outdoors. I think it was just a different interaction that we were having with our fellow community organizations than we were having prior to COVID-19, and all to increase our reach within the community.
You know, that's really interesting that you talk about that idea of even kind of validating your mission, right? Just thinking about, how do you continue to be relevant in extending your mission forth in the community. And as organizations go from being founded a few years ago to a decade or two ago, it's always, or longer, it's always really important to think about that mission and how well it's really working in service of the common good in our community. And another element of this pandemic that I think all of you have touched upon is that given that it exposed the inequities that already exist, whether you're talking about health or economics, or you're talking about racial and social injustice and other issues in our community across San Diego, you really were forced in one way or another, depending on the nature of your mission, to really grapple with this firsthand, and it looked different for each of you. Just out of curiosity, because I know there has been news, I think it was a month or two ago, about some of the inequities in the distribution of the PPP funds. And I know we certainly found that in our surveys last year as well. Just curious if you all, the jury is still out. We really want to get more information about the PPP funding in the San Diego region nonprofit community, and we're actually planning on partnering with the Johnson Center for Family Philanthropy to look at this more extensively. But in the meantime, could you share with us, did you get PPP funding, one or two rounds, and any other kind of assistance from federal and state governments and locally? And starting with you, Christy.
We did apply for PPP funds and receive them. So what you're saying is very true, Emily. We have worked with partners that weren't able to receive them, or with our economic development work with the small business community. I think that really highlighted the need for policy level work and really looking at changing those types of regulations. There was a lot of, well, it should be open to everyone, first come, first serve. But that doesn't recognize the inequities of the system, that certain people are going to get to the finish line first based on the systems that we have in place. So we saw it both among the nonprofits we worked with and then with our direct clients in the small business community. We also were able to leverage funding from the San Diego Foundation, which we are greatly appreciative of, because we did stand up very early in the pandemic a COVID-19 rapid response fund to provide mini grants to boots on the ground community-based organizations. And we were able to deploy over $100,000 in PPE and small grants in the first 3 months of the pandemic. So that was an initiative that we received other donations from local philanthropy to help us execute that, so that those smaller community-based organizations were really helping those at the neighborhood level that they served prior to COVID-19.
Thank you. Well, that is very interesting. And I'd love for Tasreen and then Greg, if you could speak to that. And also, if you have any specific observations about the role of your board in helping to secure funds. I know one thing that we heard from a number of organizations that we helped in our partnership with the local SBDC to secure the PPP funds was that boards and staff that were better connected, where they had working relationships with banking institutions, they were more likely to get PPP funding. But it also depended on the size of the assets that they held with those banking institutions. And again, this is somewhat anecdotal, so I think the jury's still out a bit. So Tasreen, can you share?
Yes, we did get 2 rounds of PPP funds. That first round, it was because of our strong finance committee, and our finance chair having a strong relationship, with our bank, and who we bank with. And I think if that hadn't been the case, I don't think that we would have gotten it. I know so many, like was said before, so many nonprofits that did not receive it because they just didn't have the connection or the support. Also to get the application in quickly, to have your numbers in and all of that. I mean, it definitely was a process. So this having gotten the first round, they made the second round a bit simpler, and it was more streamlined. So we feel really blessed that we were able to do that. But it did come with having a strong finance committee and a strong accounting firm in place to support us in doing that. And I know that's not always available for all nonprofits. So definitely felt very blessed. And it really did help sustain our core team, which we had to furlough all of our direct service staff. So it was able to sustain our core team, and give a bit of relief to the organization, because I did feel like in the beginning when all of this happened, like I said, there was a sense of uncertainty and fear of funding, right? If you're not able to provide the same services at the level that you were providing, were we going to be able to sustain the organization? So I think it really did help us in so many ways.
Well, I definitely heard your comments from that, that resonates a lot with what we heard from a number of nonprofit leaders throughout the pandemic, and underscoring then, the importance of having a board that's really organized around vital functions of the organization, including the organization's finances, and so that as needed in case of some kind of crisis or emergency, that committee can really support staff, that committee of the board can really support staff in accessing these critical resources. So, Greg, what about you?
Yeah, Interfaith Community Services received a triple P loan. The first round, it was $1.8 million. I wasn't sure whether we should apply or not. We were very fortunate to have a really strong community response and an actual increase in donations supporting our work. So at the time of application in April, May of 2019 or 2020, we were in a good financial position. But our board was very helpful in saying, this is going to be a long haul, and this is absolutely something that we should pursue. And thank God we made that decision, because between March and October of 2020, we spent more than $2 million on COVID-related expenses alone. We have a team. We have lots of locations, lots of service areas. Just the amount of money we spent on plexiglass was pretty astronomical. So that was very helpful. We did not see a decrease in gross receipts, so we didn't deem ourselves eligible for the second round. So it was just the one round. Very thankful we did. It was a huge part of us being able to continue to provide services. We also were able to provide hazard pay to our employees during that spring of 2020. Again, they were putting themselves on the line. They were taking significant risk. There was a lot of uncertainty, and we were able to compensate them for that. And then, back when PPE was so hard to come by, we had, we were scrambling like crazy for hand sanitizer, masks. You can't quite see behind me, but my office turned into a storage closet of all that stuff, and it still kind of has the remnants of it. So a lot of those items were donated when they were impossible to even purchase. So we really relied upon community partnerships to be able to support us and allow us to keep that work going.
A couple other things I just wanted to underscore that really came from all of you that I think does highlight that, in spite of the fact that the nonprofit sector in San Diego and elsewhere across the United States really was hard hit by the pandemic in a way that we didn't even see in the last Great Recession that was devastating economically. You also hear these stories of collaboration, of innovation, and also something that I think nonprofits do so well, and that is really sharing resources and helping one another. And I know that right shortly after, I think the initial stay-home orders, et cetera, last year at the Nonprofit Institute, we partnered with Fieldstone Leadership Network San Diego to create a Facebook page called the Nonprofit Resource Network. And over 400 people really quickly subscribed to that. And the whole point of that Facebook page was really to have nonprofits connect with one another to share resources. And it just strikes me that that is so common for nonprofit leaders, the initial impulse to collaborate and support one another, that really is what got us through this. And then another thing I wanted to touch on, that it's good to hear that your board really helped to encourage you, Greg, and your team to apply for the PPP, and that was, you know, this hesitancy about applying for the PPP funds, because there was that concern, well then who else is going to be left behind? And fortunately, a lot of nonprofits did apply for that funding, because what we're hearing is not only did that funding really help organizations survive, but in some cases thrive and make one-time investments that were necessary to respond to the pandemic. As you said, all this PPP equipment and other kinds of technology upgrades and things to ensure that nonprofit organizations could deliver the services that were needed in the community and fulfilling their missions for that. You know, a question that I know came up when we were preparing for this conversation this morning was, you know, whether there were also areas where there, you know, places of contention between boards and staff. I'm certainly seeing this from other nonprofit organizations, hearing where there were disconnects. Certainly one area that we heard kind of uneven stories around was just around the racial and social injustice protests. I'm just curious, in that area or other areas, did you find real differences and challenges in working with your board where you can kind of share some lessons learned from that with our audience today? And with that, I know, Greg, you shared a story on the call, and I know, so would you like to share that with the rest of us?
Sure, yes. I mean, our mission is around addressing poverty, and in the wake of the tragedy with George Floyd and the racial reckoning that many in our country are somewhat newer to, the organization really said that if we're going to fulfill our mission to empower people in need, we need to be addressing racial inequities. So we created an employee racial justice working group to look at how our programs are addressing that, ways we can do better internally and externally. At the board level, one of our board members, who's a faith leader, formed a coalition of faith leaders to support this work. But at our full board, there were challenges and there were concerns, and we actually lost some board members who didn't believe that we should be addressing racism as part of our mission, and thought that we should be addressing the ills of racism, but that we were getting out of our lane to do racial justice work. And so that was a challenge. It's a challenge that continues. I think it mirrors the work. It mirrors part of the reason that these problems are so entrenched, is that there are a lot of, I would say, people of privilege, and I look at myself in that regard, who don't acknowledge the inequities that are there. And so we're going to continue to do this work, and but understand that it comes at a cost, but it's critical and it has to happen.
Well, thank you for that, Greg. And that's certainly something that we're hearing back in our surveys as well. And I've certainly heard other stories across the San Diego community about that. And I know we, in response to what we heard back from our community partners here among nonprofit organizations across the San Diego region, we certainly did put together different kinds of training for boards and staff around anti-racism and racial equity. And yet there does continue to be that kind of tension. However, that's not true for all organizations. And one of the things that we found in our last State of Nonprofits and Philanthropy survey was that those organizations that had more diverse staff and more diverse boards, they seem to be better positioned to really think through these issues together with that diversity of lived experiences and perspectives. And I know, Tasreen, you talked a bit about that in our preparation for this call. Can you share some of the things that you guys were talking about, over the course of these protests and the kinds of national dialogue and conversations that we've been having that have been evolving over the last number of months?
I think that, and it was so much in our plenary address today, is that this work has to be integrated into every fiber of your organization. And I think with everything that happened with George Floyd, and the racial injustices that we were all seeing, the veils really being pulled off of our eyes, and people, I feel, being more aware of the injustices. They were not living in the back, but they were in front of us now. And as an organization, we really have focused making sure that we do have a diverse board with diverse voices that can strengthen our internal work around DEI, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And how do we integrate that into every fiber within our organization? And even though we're a social justice organization and we serve programs really rooted in restoration and building equity within our schools and communities, we also had, an incident between board and staff that really brought up some spores that we had in our own organization around racism and patriarchy. And we needed to be courageous and have difficult conversations and practice what we preach, right? Walk our own talk and really address some of the concerns that were just happening within our own organization. And we really used our restorative mindset and our restorative philosophy around, when harm happens, how do we repair from that harm? How are we accountable? And how do we grow and learn together to strengthen our organization so we can better serve the population of people that we serve?
I really appreciate that. And I think it points to the fact that these conversations aren't easy. And we've got centuries of history and things that with the colonization and founding of the United States happened that we've never fully come to terms with. And yet with the pandemic having laid bare so much more of this and really putting it in front of our eyes, especially with all of us being less distracted and at home and seeing things like George Floyd's murder, I couldn't look away. It's also presented a wonderful opportunity for us to have these conversations and figure out our way forward. And I'm just curious, Christy, I know this is something you've been thinking about collectively as well, and if there's anything else you want to share in terms of your conversation both with your board and then also thinking about working with staff and boards of other organizations in Southeast San Diego.
Sure. I think I just want to add to the conversation too that we are lucky to have a diverse employee base, but that also means that they have personally experienced this past year differently. And one of the things that we really focused on following up on that kind of restorative area is to be checking in with our staff members who have been working more than they did to achieve our goals throughout COVID-19. But then also that other level of what's been happening locally across the country and really making sure that they aren't getting, burned out or that they are being able to really process what's happening in the work that we do and feel supported. And some of our employees have really taken what they've gone through to want to do more for our organization. That's been really amazing to see them find some personal passion being sparked and saying, hey, can we do this? And offering what they are taking in personally as something to then translate to add value to help our organization achieve our mission even deeper or further or with our partners. That's been something that we have wanted to encourage to deepen our diversity and inclusive work at our own organizational level.
Well, thank you for that. And I think I know that was something that we talked about in preparation for this session. Any comments that Tasreen, you or Greg have about, helping keep employees supported physically and emotionally and the road ahead, because this is something that's challenging. We're all trying to figure out, well, how do we get back together and those tentative steps. And we've been so trained over the last 18 months to avoid each other. And we've lost our social skills, and there's a lot of incivility, and there are a lot of people that went through a lot this year, and that looks different depending on who you are. So I'd love it if you could comment on that, and then more broadly, what should boards be thinking about as in helping organizations transition into this kind of hopefully post-pandemic time, and what's ahead, and how we're rebuilding. So Tasreen, starting with you with those two questions, and then going to Greg and Christy. And any questions, I'll let you know, that are coming in from the audience. I'll keep you posted.
I think that connection is going to be so crucial, moving forward, and communication is going to be so crucial moving forward. I know that in supporting our team and our staff, making space and time in staff meetings to really truly check in with people. Like was said, many people have been walking different paths, and this pandemic has impacted people in different ways. And if we don't, I think, make time to open up space to really connect and hear what everyone's going through and try to be a support to each other, I think that's going to be really crucial moving forward. I know that we always talk about, self-care and making time, I think, for self-care. We do that. We build it into our staff meetings, whether it's spending time on mindfulness or just doing a restorative circle. It's been really an important piece of keeping us connected, even virtually, and utilizing, technology to help us stay connected. And I think with boards, they're so crucial and vital in this time. I think so much has been put on staff to keep the organization going. Many of us lost staff, so we're wearing multiple hats. So I think just the value that board members bring in the way they can support and continue to guide and provide wisdom as we kind of recover and get back to a new normal, and ensuring we stay focused on our mission and serving at the highest possible capacity that we can serve.
Thank you so much, Tasreen. Yeah, that need to really stay engaged and continue to lean in to that responsibility as a board member with empathy and providing moral support for the staff. And how about you, Greg?
Well, we had this total cognitive disconnect, or I don't know, that's not the right term, but we were always here. We were always in person doing the work while seemed like the rest of the world was, or a lot of the world was shut down, right? So, we early on provided hazard pay, and that was a big deal. When we were no longer financially able to do that, we started providing more time off for our employees. A lot of people were covering different shifts, and so we were able to provide some additional flexible days off. We had a half day off where all of our teams staggered it, and the marching order was just to go do an outdoor activity with your team, do something fun, do something not work related, make it safe, right? Blow off some steam, and now the question is, as we get back to whatever the next new normal is, how do we maintain what is necessary and most impactful to support our teams? We had early release Fridays going every other Friday that we just stopped because we deemed it wasn't sustainable. I'm not sure if that's the right decision or not. I don't have the data to show whether it was helpful or not, but we made the best call that we can. Tomorrow we have an employee appreciation day. We're getting all of our team together, and we have the opportunity to all go and be at the safari park at the zoo. It'll be the first agency-wide in-person gathering in a year and a half, and we can't wait to see one another. So I think to call back to your question, the second question, Emily, the importance of having a board that is keyed into these challenges and understanding of the difficulties we're facing in the work that we do, and being there to help and engage and advise is critical, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know that we need a strong board who can be there to ensure the perpetuity of our mission and our organization. So I think having engaged board members is really critical for our long-term sustainability.
Well, this has really been a great conversation, and I know we have just under 4 minutes left. I'm curious if you could just share, there were a lot of things that you put in place in terms of new innovative ways of working, different kinds of practices and policies, some of which you've already let go of, but others you'll likely continue. Could you all share with us, what are you thinking will stay in place post-COVID? And we'll start with you, Tesserine, and then go to you, Christy and Greg.
I think the main thing for us is no one wants to go into the office every day. So I think what will continue is everyone will kind of have a hybrid work schedule. And I think that the not commuting and not having to physically travel to being in person all the time is something that we're going to keep with us. I think for us, it will help a lot of us with work-life balance and in saving that time when we can work really effectively virtually, but also come in person when we need to, which we will. But I think that will be one thing that will stay in place. And I know that our diversity, equity, and inclusion work is going to be really strong, and we're going to keep that moving forward. We've even had a staff person that's their focus, to keep that in the front always, in every aspect of what we do is going to be really crucial for us moving forward as well.
So hybrid and DEI kind of work. I know in our last 2 minutes, Christy and Greg.
Sure, I'll be really quick. We've done a lot of coalition work right now and cooperative work among organizations, and I think that's going to deepen and stay, because that's allowed all of the organizations participating stabilization in terms of if one has less capacity over an effort, another organization is stepping in to help, whether it's for grant writing or whether it's for an event that the group wants to do. I think that's creating some increased capacity by working together that will be beneficial to us coming out of COVID-19 and for the long term.
Thank you. And you got the last word, Greg.
Well, I think the timing is good for us because we're renewing our strategic plan and looking at how we can not just address the symptoms of poverty, the symptoms, the results of racism of all forms, but what we need to do and what we're called to do to prevent those things from happening in the first place. So that's the biggest change for us, is committing to not just helping people in their time of need, but trying to prevent those needs from occurring in the first place.
It's amazing to think that things that we would have thought we could never get to maybe 2 years ago, but with the pandemic, we realized that there were a lot of things that we could and had to put in place fairly quickly, and issues that have been swept under the rug or thought to be too big, too insurmountable to address, that now we're talking about this is the way forward. We have to grapple with systemic racism and issues that really are holding us back as a society to really fully and inclusively thrive and ensure that everybody enjoys a high quality of life in the San Diego region. I just want to thank all of you for the incredible work that you do. Thank you for your leadership. Thanks for sharing your stories. A lot of insights there, and we really appreciate your service to our community and hope that you have a wonderful rest of the symposium and rest of your day and week. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.